Well, this evening we're going to explore a curious problem. And the title, of course, is The Blocks in Our Inner Sophist. But I was thinking about this title. I could have equally have expressed it in terms of another title. So let me consider that one. Why you have to have a problem if you live in this universe. Right? Could equally have called it the necessity of having a problem. From that, if you have, therefore, what is called a problem, that's a block. So, this very language suggests this very familiar model. There you go. Right? And you encounter a block. Can't get through it. The very nature of that block is an inner voice which you attend to and believe. That's the whole problem. Because this block is a fundamental belief. Which you have. That belief takes the form of an inner thought, subvocal statement, some image. In any case, it's persuasive, and that's what I call the inner sophist. So let's see if we can get there now. That's the goal, that's where we're going, it's all in one. Right? Okay. Now, one of the most difficult problems, using the word problem in another sense, is this word, conditions. And let's see if I can talk about that for a moment. Use this. All right, there's a podium. Would you agree it's easy to talk about that podium in terms of the usual four ideas? It couldn't have come into existence without wood, framed in a certain way. And then you need some worker, right, to work on the wood. And you certainly can't do that without some plan or design. And if you have these three things, that's not enough. Someone has to have a need for it. Sometimes that's called that for the sake of which it came into existence. We'll just call it that for the sake of. These are, of course, called the causes. But I want to talk about something that comes before causes, and without which a cause couldn't be a cause. For a cause is one thing, but that without which a cause could not be a cause is quite another thing. Now look here. Let's take a look at this. I mean, that couldn't be there even if you had these things, unless there was the possibility of going from the design and the plan and the skill and making something like the design. I mean, unless the nature of reality has the condition for a likeness, nothing could be like anything else. And this could not come into existence unless there was the condition necessary for it, which is the idea of likeness. Same thing is true in terms of God. Right? God creates in any way, or something like a God. Creates or brings into an existence a universe. There must be some similarity, some likeness between the universe that comes into existence and the idea of it. That is to say, universe is nothing other than an idea in the mind of God put into existence. But that's not possible unless before it came into existence there was the condition of likeness. So likeness is the supreme principle upon which creation is presupposed. Now, we can talk about other kinds of conditions. But what I'm interested in, how did we pick that condition as the one to talk about? Well, doesn't it follow that the whole effort of the designer of this is to bring into existence something like the plan? And there would be no point in doing it unless that possibility existed. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And you and I agree together, and we'll take on all people who oppose us, right? Good.
Yeah.
Therefore, in some curious way, there must be an existence for certain conditions that are prior to the manifestation of that likeness. So what are we going to do with that? Well, I'd like to shift gears for a moment and skip a page because I want to use it later and go to this rather curious problem. I'm going to call this the search for commonness. Here you see someone sitting, and let's say that's the meditator. There it is. Notice no mouth, not talking. Now, in order to play with this image, we have to assume several things. Let's assume there is such a thing as enlightenment. Let's go further, because that's not enough. We have to assume that it is something which admits of degrees or stages or levels. And let's go further and say they can be hierarchically arranged so that we can talk about a partial enlightenment all the way to hierarchy, a pure, complete enlightenment. Or it is exactly what it is. Now, let's go further and say that we have an interest in people who play this game of meditation and the quest for enlightenment. And we can then say that some people reach this stage, or this stage, or this stage. It's possible, therefore, to run all the way up to the top. Well, let's assume one more thing. that this person has reached a partial enlightenment, and as a consequence, this person is interested in going beyond the partial enlightenment. Now, why would they want to do it? If we can find out why they want to do it, it's likely we'll be able to talk about what might be common to anyone in this pursuit. If we get that, then we might be able to go from stages to conditions. And if we can go from stages to prior conditions, then we can go back and take a look at the problem we presented ourselves for tonight. So, let's see whether you agree. Is it not likely, then, that we need a name for this person? Right? What name?
George.
Good, good, very good. All right, Pat. All right? There she is, Pat. Thank you for that name. And let's go further now and say she has, in fact, now let's go backwards and call this the 10th, 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th, 5, 4, 3. All right? That in her meditation she has reached the 5th stage. Now, notice the language. She has reached the 5th stage. Does that mean in the very nature of reality these stages must be in place already? Can we go further and say, that's very interesting. Now, whatever we say about Pat, we want to know whether we can equally say that about a group of other people who are engaged in a similar activity, right, who may in fact have reached different stages. So we want to see whether we can generalize it. Would you be willing to just take one view and say, in order to do that, it took some kind of work, right? Some kind of dedication, some kind of effort. If it takes dedication and effort, then it presupposes there should be some kind of drive or energy, right? Some kind of vital force that Pat can tap into. Now, if she can tap into that vital force, then that vital force may have caused her to turn around and take a look at herself. That's a term we've run into before. We're going to call that, see, the word conversion is not a good word because some people can be converted today, and they use that language without necessarily a turning about of their consciousness or psyche. So we're going to call that by the Greek name, ousia. Right. What's ousia? It's that capacity within us to turn about, reflect upon ourselves, and consider that a very important aspect of our existence, right? Okay, all right. So then, she has this going for her. She's got this. All right. Wow. Now, does that not presuppose in our talk that prior to her effort, prior to this achievement, she must not have been enlightened at all. And therefore she must have gone from a lower to a higher. Right? And that possibility must be part of the nature of reality. Oh, look her. That's an interesting movement, see, going from a lower to a higher. Now that's a very interesting concept. It's sometimes called, in the Greek world, purifying. Right? The purifying of the soul. Right? So we can call this purification. Not that she's being dipped into anything like a baptism, right? But moving from a lower to a higher by dropping the lower concern and allowing herself to merge with the higher. That's all we mean by, see, to purify from the lower, to be able to ascend to the higher. That's all we mean by purification. Oh. Now that we got her there, you see, what we need to do is to say, what is there interesting about that? Well, let's say one of the difficulties with temporary expedience or glimpses, let's call them glimpses, is by the very nature of a glimpse, you don't have any staying power. It doesn't allow you to reside there. It's a glimpse. It's a tourist, right? Metaphysical tourist. Yeah. Now, you can get that in a variety of ways. Any kind of energy display might wake you up into a, right? But it has no staying power. Now, what do we mean by that, see? Well, for that to be there, there she is at stage 5. That means in reaching that, she can benefit by it. To the degree that she is there, right, she can maintain herself in that state. Right. Possibly because she knows what she's inwardly gone through, she might be able to return to it more readily than someone who doesn't know that. So that maintaining is very significant. And with it, there has to be some collective process that goes on that allows her to conserve in some way what it is she's reached. Because if it's only a glimpse and it's goodbye, Charlie, then you have nothing for your trip. You want to, in some way, be in a state where you can maintain it, conserve it. Right? That's what you need. Right? Now, that also means, does it not, that for each of these stages, for the stages themselves, there has to be some kind of a structure that holds them in place and maintains those levels the way they are. Not just that you've reached it, that Pat reached it, but they're there to be reached and can be ordered in that way and in reaching them, there's certain consequences that follow from it. Because if she only took a glimpse of it and couldn't maintain that state for any length of time, disillusionment is likely to take over, right? If she couldn't conserve anything that she has seen while there, it would have little benefit. So, equally well now, these stages in themselves must have that capacity, condition. Now, you know, what's interesting about this is that without one more element, there wouldn't be much purpose in going through it at all. Now, we're going to put a name on this. We need a name. So I'll use an old name. Right? This is called, there's a necessary protective force in the nature of reality. Because it protects the structure, maintains each stage the way it is, allows the possibility of some conservation going on through it all, from which you can then, from that, have something to bring back and to be changed by it. Because if you don't have anything that you can take back, or with you, or because of it have, that has any enduring feature, there's no point in the glimpse at all. So therefore, built into this must be that possibility of conserving. Now, to maintain and conserve is to defend. All right? That's defending. And in that sense, it's a protective. So that's how I'm using the word. Now, well, none of this would be of any consequence if there wasn't yet another reason we need this. Because unless there was something built into this, necessarily, that suggests at any level experienced, there is something that necessarily built behind it is a dynamic that allows, permits, provides the condition for perfection. And therefore, that protection, that perfection means that the structure remains as it is, remains in place, and notice what it does. It remains in place in that sense. It's preserving a structure which has this potential of emerging higher, right? Therefore, it preserves a structure that is dynamic. Why dynamic? Because it has the capacity to pull one through it. And it's not only dynamic, but it's arranged hierarchically, because perfection means hierarchical necessarily. Therefore, the nature of reality must be a hierarchically multi-leveled structure which can reveal itself in the course of the spiritual exploration of man. And from that we can then find these 5 principles which are built into the very structure of our reality, which we're calling the conditions. So therefore, by looking at these stages and considering someone going for the ride, right, the spiritual ride of enlightenment, we can say we can now point out these conditions necessary for this to be at all. Those are the conditions. Now, can we not say, that it's likely that what we've said would also fit Charlie and George, east and west, north and south? Would it even follow for someone who comes from Brooklyn? That's the final test. Right? All right, look here. For that to be in place gives another kind of a very interesting problem. We need something else. We need something else in this. And I think you may see it implicit in this, but I'd like to see whether we can make it explicit. And therefore you have to do some work. Luckily enough, I brought it. And luckily enough, it's only a couple of sentences. Now, I apologize for the fact that I don't have clean copies. They're kind of marked up by my marks. But what we're going to look at is a couple of propositions from Proclus, and we're going to spend some time on 143. It's one of my favorites. So don't look at it right away, because we're going to go to 142 first. Now, okay, once you get one set going, hold it for a moment and then pass the next. This means, therefore, the condition for enlightenment is pervasive and continuous. That's what this is saying. Because once we say it's true for reality, then the condition for enlightenment is pervasive, continuous, not here and there. All right? Now, we call this conditions. Proclus calls it principles. Right? These are the principles of the nature of theology. So let's jump into it, okay? Let's jump into it. There's one word we're going to look at, key word, all right. This word, depending upon how you grasp it, what you do with it, all right, it's going to depend upon how you see everything we do. Everyone have two sheets?
Pages 124, 25, 126, and 127.
That's right. That's what it should be.
Yeah.
You have 124?
Yeah, I have 124. I need 127.
You have 124? I don't. That's it? You just have a certain number?
What do you need? I have an extra 126.
Here's 126? There we go.
You have two?
Yeah, this is an extra 127. Of course, it's probably bigger than this is an extra 124.
There's a couple 126.
Okay, good. All right.
So we have 2 pages?
Yes.
Okay.
142 is where we're going. And even though 141 looks very, very attractive, right now we're just going for 141 and 142. Pardon me, 142, 143. Now, in order to help you this, all right, Conditions, what are we saying about conditions? He calls them principles. Now watch. Conditions, since they have some kind of reality built into the nature of reality, he calls them principles. Watch now, one more step. Would you not agree that means built into the nature of reality, built into the very structure of it, with these conditions or principles, that is the source of goodness for those who can participate in it? Sure. Would you not agree, for anybody becoming involved in this, the necessary assumption is that to get into any state of enlightenment from 3 to 10 presupposes that if it is hierarchically arranged to that degree, there is a greater degree of goodness as you proceed up that hierarchical scale. Working back now, we can say then built into the very nature of reality, the very structure of it is the principle of goodness being dispersed under these conditions. Watch now. If each of these principles has a kind of unity, right? If it has a kind of unity, if we described it in such a way that you can identify the unity that each of these has, and you can then say it has a kind of an existence, and that very existence necessarily brings about a goodness, then principles of this kind are called deities or gods. See the steps? That's the way he calls it. So, if it has a unity, 1. 2, if it can be said to exist eternally, because it's the very condition for existence, right? Very condition for it. In other words, this entire universe could, for one reason or the other, collapse. So long as the conditions are still in place, another universe might very likely emerge, and the same thing could still be said in another universe. To that degree, then, we can say that this is something that is out of time, and in that sense it exists out of time, it's eternal. Wait a minute. If it has a unity, right, that's very interesting. Right? Has an existence, has an eternal structure. Right? It is in principle displaying necessarily in its production a goodness that's worthy of the name of a god. Therefore, these are, we can call them deified principles. So with that, I'd like to just read, therefore, 142. The gods are present alike to all things. Not all things, however, are present alike to the gods, but each order has a share in their presence proportioned to its station and its capacity, right? And capacity, I'm putting in the word its. Some things receiving them as unities, others as manifolds, some perpetually and others for a time, some incorporeal, others through the body. All right, now watch, I'm going to go to 143. All inferior principles retreat before the presence of the gods, and provided the participant be fit for its reception, right? Whatever is alien makes way for the divine light, and all things are continuously illuminated by the gods. Because a range of these experiences is something that we have encountered previously as the divine luminosity, right? Now, look here. Take a look at this cookie. Right? All inferior principles retreat before the presence of the gods. And provided the participant be fit for its reception, whatever is alien makes way for the divine light, and all things are continuously illuminated by the gods. Now, all he's going to do is give you 2 sentences to explore that. Did I hear something?
Yeah, and provided the participant be fit, is that provided in the sense that is ready for?
Yeah. And you will read, therefore, the statement. Go ahead. For the divine principles, loud.
Oh, I see. For the divine principles are always more comprehensive and more potent than those which proceed from them. And it is the unfitness of the participants which occasions the failure of the divine light, obscuring by its weakness even that radiance. Is that the weakness of the participants? I'm asking, is that the weakness of the participants?
I would ask you
Obscuring by
whether,
its weakness
would
even-
you make the judgment, please?
Let's see,
Reread
and
it, please.
is the unfitness, okay. For the
Go ahead.
divine principles are always more comprehensive and more potent than those which proceed from them. And is the unfitness of the participants which occasions the failure of the divine light, obscuring by its weakness even that radiance.
Yeah. Would you answer your question?
Looks like, yeah, it's the unfitness of the participants.
Keep going.
Okay. When the light is obscured, another principle appears to assume dominion. Yet it is not by its own potency, but through the impotence of the participant, that it has the appearance of revolting against the divine form of illumination.
Do that
That's
last.
interesting.
Yeah, do that again,
Okay.
please. Come on.
Do you want the whole of it?
When the light, when the light is obscured,
Another principle appears to assume dominion.
that appears to assume dominion. Go ahead.
Yet it is not by its own potency,
No, it's not by its own potency. Go ahead.
but through the impotency of the participant.
It's the impotence of the participant. That's the cause of it all. Keep going.
That it has the appearance of revolting against the divine form of illumination.
Gives just the appearance of a revolt.
It is of an appearance?
Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Thank
that's
you.
what it says.
I picked on the right reader. Right? Now look here. We have this structure, and we have this very simple 3-sentence statement. Now, what can we do with it? We can say, therefore, from these principles, necessarily, all the time, continuous, pervasive, what's emerging?
Potency.
Light, louder?
Light.
Divine light, divine luminosity, right? And therefore it's going on all the time,
Yes.
which is why when you have real good pictures of Tibetan sages and Buddhists and philosophers that were drawn before 800 BC, they're always shown with sunglasses. Because the divine radiance is so much, right? Okay, right? Now, if this is the case, what does that mean? Who's got the problem?
Participant.
We have the problem.
Those with
Right?
partial
Not the nature of reality. The nature of reality is not evil. Right? It's not flawed. Right? Now let's take a look at a contrast something here for a moment. Okay, this is the problem of Paul and Socrates. Now, Paul, as you know, one of the founders of what is called Pauline Christianity, was someone who was a hired killer, and he saw that he was involved in a mission to stone people to death. That was his job, and he seems to have taken that with a great deal of glee and dedication. These types, thank goodness, are not too prevalent in society. But he was a murderer who would stone people to death. And this strange duck, if I may call him that, on the road to Damascus, had a conversion experience, so we're told. And the way to understand that conversion experience in theological circles is to say, God, through an act of grace, picked him because he had a certain mission, according to the story, and therefore God admits of a relationship with participants. That's what this says. Remember, I said everything is going to hinge on this one word, relation. Because, would you not agree, you and I might wonder, given what we've been saying, what did Paul go through to have such a conversion experience, given the fact that he was stoning people to death? And in those days, they didn't make statistical studies on how many stones and at what weight it takes to break how many bones in what period of time in order to bring about death. They weren't concerned with statistics in those days. But this means, does it not, to explain that, you need a theory. The theory you have to have is that God enters into a relationship with the participants, and since he can do that, that's an act of grace. Now, let's therefore take a look at (142). Now, the degree to which a person can participate in this must either be due to a deity or to the participant. So let's take a look. All right. Would you agree we need a reader? Go ahead. 142, please.
The gods are present alike to all things. Not all things, however, are present alike to the gods. But each order has a share in their presence, proportioned to its station and capacity. Some things receiving them as unities, and others as manifolds, some perpetually, and others for a time. Some incorporeally, and others through the body.
Okay, now go slow. Go ahead.
For differences in the participation of the same principles must be due to a difference either in the participant or in that which is participated.
All right, now here we go for the major idea. But
whatever is divine keeps the same station forever.
Ah,
So it can't be.
right, keeps the same, pervasive, continuous, doesn't depart from that. Go ahead.
And is free from all relation to the lower and all admixture with it.
What does that mean? In this
Doesn't mean
picture, it does not permit, allow, or is there a place for any special relationship between the two?
Right.
Hmm.
So it's gotta follow.
Yeah. Yeah.
It follows.
Yeah. Go ahead. You're doing great.
It follows by exclusion that the variation can be due only to the participants. In them must lie the lack of uniformity, and it is they that are present to the gods diversely at different times and diversely one from another.
Hmm.
Thus, while the gods are present alike to all things,
That's right.
not all things are present alike to them. Each order is present in the degree of its capacity and enjoys them in the degree of its presence, which is the measure of its participation.
Right.
Now,
Right.
wait a minute. Is-
The degree of its presence is the measure of its participation.
That's right. Right. Okay. Now look
so
here.
It's, gods
Louder.
are present all alike in all things. So that means that there's divineness in all things equally. It's the obscureness of the participant that's the
You're
problem.
mumbling.
Oh.
Louder. Come on.
So gods are present in all things equally.
Yeah. Bang. See? Pervasive. That means alike. Alike. Go ahead.
But when it says not all things are present alike to them, that means they don't see that it's divineness then. It's radiance.
And what's the reason for that?
Each
Come on.
order is present in the degree of its capacity.
Also, remember 143, what you just did. It's obscured by its own weakness
Right.
from the radiance itself, its own impotence. Go ahead.
And
All right. Okay. Now, yeah. Want to do more?
well, I'm just wondering is it, when it goes down to 143, is it because its impotence, yet it is not by its own potency, but through the impotence of the participant? Order is present in the degree of its capacity. So that keeps it to a certain level. That's its degree of capacity. I'm following. Okay.
Great.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah. Well,
And enjoys.
as my uncle used to say, if you can't be certain, be sure. Okay. Now, I now want to give you two problems. Right? One is called the problem of Paul and Socrates. We looked at the problem of Paul. We haven't mentioned Socrates yet. And that's what I want to wait for. All right. But that's enough. Let's go back now. To here. Convinced of these principles, would you not agree? You want to be very attentive to whatever takes you away from your goal. For that is the block. That's your block. You want to know your block? Right? Listen as you try to achieve what's most personally significant to you. Whatever it is that persuades you to give up your goal, that voice, that feeling state, that attitude, whatever it is, those three, right? That's reflecting your problem, your block. And it's persuading you to give it up. That is what I call your inner sophist. That inner sophist has an origin, right? Comes from somewhere, comes from your experiences that have convinced you that these ideas can justify your failure. Any idea that justifies your failure is sophistry. period. Right? There's only one standard, excellence. Anything in any way that convinces you that you can't achieve an inner excellence is a problem. Sophistry. Yeah.
And that's another principle appears to assume dominion in 143.
Right, right. Now, some people might say, oh no, that shows the evidence of something imperfect in the nature of reality or in opposition to reality, a demonic force or something like this. Well, these are belief structures that people then rely upon to justify their own impotence. All right, okay, now we go for the next one. And that's why nearly all philosophers in the early paintings, not only did they have sunglasses, but they always had big ears. Right? Because they were always listening. Right? Always inner listening to these voices that persuade them not to do what leads to their own excellence, right? So isn't that true? The Buddha has a statue and he's got the biggest ears known in any sculptor. Yeah, that's why I got them. A friend of mine told me that. And while he was known to lie, I thought this was true. All right, okay, back. Here we go. The problem?
By the way, you're not going to go to Socrates without doing a little more with Paul. I mean, what is this God he's talking about?
Grace.
Yeah, so there's grace. How's this related?
Yeah. Well, the problem with Paul is twofold. One is you have his own statement of his conversion in Galatians, and you have three accounts in the writings of Luke, who appears to have lived 40 years after him, and gives an account of this conversion experience. Of course, it doesn't appear in Paul's own writing, so therefore there's a problem of whether or not it's genuine and things like this occur. And that's a theological nice argument that goes on among scholars, theologians. So let me deal with Socrates, okay? All right, okay. Luckily enough, I brought a book. I'll just read a few quotes for you, and but where God posted me, I'm reading the Apology, but where God posted me, as I thought and believed, with the duty to be a philosopher and to test myself and others, there I should fear neither death nor anything else and desert my post. For this is what God commands. Make no mistake. And I think there is no greater good for you in the city, in any way, than my service to God. Now, therefore, gentlemen, so far as for pleading for my own sake, because the apology is the trial, as you know. Now, therefore, so far from pleading for my own sake, as one might expect, I plead for your sakes, that you may not offend about God's gift by condemning me. For if you put me to death, you will not easily find such another, really like something stuck on the state by the God, though it's laughable to say so. I'm skipping. And therefore, unless God sends you another in his care for you, that I'm really one given by God, I'll give you some reasons. And he then gives some reasons why he thinks that. Now, I could give a couple of more quotes, but read one more, several very fine ones. And I maintain that I have been commanded by the God to do this through oracles and dreams and in every way in which some divine influence or other has ever commanded a man to do anything. Now, would you not agree? One might claim God got to you or contacted you through dreams and meditations and chanting and a whole variety of ways. Now, what does this mean? And I maintain that I have been commanded by the God to do this through oracles and dreams and in every way in which some divine influence or other has ever commanded a man to do anything. It's been busy then, hasn't it? Now, wait a minute. Is that a special relationship? What's the difference between this and this?
The relationship.
Looks like a relationship to me.
Well, very, what's all this command, what's all this commanding and stationing and
Yeah.
positioning?
Yes,
and
quite right.
signing? Is that, and how does that compare with Paul now? How was Paul, what was Paul's job? Was he commanded to
Yes.
sign?
Yes?
He was.
Yes.
Well, so they had the same guy.
Well, that's why I'm raising this as the problem. Do you not see? There's something wrong. Or right, because if there is a special key relationship going on, then everything we've done is wrong. Which is very possible. Whether it's likely is another question. Yeah.
A difference I noticed was Socrates seems to have gotten many messages through oracles and dreams,
That's true.
a consistent and collective message.
Mhm.
And in the way we briefly described Paul's experience, it sounds like he had a conversion experience. Maybe unconfirmed, maybe a one-time thing.
It was.
That might be significant.
Actually, he says it occurred one other time, actually, but that's a very vague statement in the Corinthians. Okay, more? Come on, more?
Maybe he was stoned himself.
Maybe he was stoned himself.
He woke up to a clunk on the
That's
head.
kind of just a little.
That's all right, that's all right. I'll take it. So therefore, our problem is, it looks like that everything we've done tonight, while interesting, doesn't fit. Which is a... No?
Don't leave it there.
Wait.
We're not done.
Let's see.
We're not
No, the
done.
the content of what Paul decided was the result of that grace, that content came from him, not the God. And what he turned it into, what he decided to do with it in forming Christianity. Socrates took his commands from the gods directly. It doesn't seem...
Wait a minute, couldn't you say that equally for Paul? Come on. You could say the same thing.
Don't know them.
Actually, in one of the accounts, Ananias was someone who guided Paul through the early stages.
Could we call that message that came to Socrates an act of grace?
That's the issue. If grace, special relation. If special relation, then what we've developed is false.
Is that what grace is?
Yes, special relation. Yes.
Special relation.
Yes.
What are we going to do with this stuff in Propus, where Socrates, where the person has the station, the ability, where it's being, I don't have the exact words here, those, let's see, participations of failure, obscured by weakness.
That's true.
Can we deal with that element?
Yeah,
in Paul
yeah.
and Socrates?
Yeah.
I mean, because Socrates, we would see, has a more ability to participate.
Then,
Whereas
good.
Paul,
Push that.
when he says grace, I mean, he's just riding along, gets knocked by something. You know, there's no effort on his part. You know, he's not.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, you know, you wait around for it to happen.
That's
basically.
right. That's right.
And Socrates, this is a lifelong study of his.
Ah.
And, you know,
Are you then saying, to the degree that he, go ahead,
I'm trying
Is
to use
testing.
something.
He was
his
receptive.
own-
Receptive to the
Yeah.
divine, more.
Pushing different levels of that experience.
Pushing different levels, vitalizing himself, turning about, going through all of these stages.
He was
All of
prepared.
them. Seeing maybe the unity of the different levels, the higher and the lower of them.
Yes?
Champion.
Well,
Not the unity, but the interconnectedness of them.
Well, okay, look here, it looks like you're getting some nice understanding, so let's see if I can make it more complex and confusing. Right, I mean, after all, yes.
And I've been curious what the light looks like. And so, while
Pardon?
I'm trying to meditate, I'm like, the light, okay.
Uh-huh.
Essentially, then a drift every once in a while.
Do it again?
I would drift off into another state of mind.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's good.
Some thoughts.
That's good. Look here. Is there evidence, come on, back into it. Is there evidence that in the Socratic picture you have to go through stages and work and, right? Does he become fit for participation? Well, wait a minute.
Well, if you look at the symposium,
Wow.
that's evident there. I mean, he's
Okay.
talking about that
All right.
study, that whole study, an effort, a
All right.
stages.
Then we'll change this just slightly. Then at the 10th level, let's assume Socrates for the moment reached the 10th level, then relation then is possible. And therefore the system falls.
Do that again now. 10th.
Okay? Let's preserve what we've said about Socrates. He made himself fit for participation and therefore for a special relationship with the divine, which he claims he has had. If that's so, let us assume he reached the 10th level, or that stage, which is actually the 8th. Right? Then we could say, at that level, it is possible to have a relationship. Now, is there anything in Plato that suggests that?
But wouldn't he have
Where?
Symposium,
Where?
Theatinus.
Where? What? Yeah.
So the divided line is kind of an interesting
Pardon?
place to consider. Divided line,
Yeah, say more.
a world of appearances, or a,
World of appearances. Go ahead.
a perception of things as they appear versus as they really are, and the idea that we can participate on one part of this line or another. The cave, also in the Republic, suggests
Mhm.
we can experience, based on the conditions we're in a more real or unreal reality.
Mhm.
One more full of appearances, or that which is not real. These both suggest a journey, which also our diagram suggests. A hierarchy.
Uh-huh. Special relationship? Is there anything in Plato that suggests that? If I went to page 106 in the Symposium, in this edition of the Great Dialogues of Plato, do you not reflect that there only it will be possible for him, when he sees the beautiful with the mind, which alone can see it, to give birth not to likenesses of virtue, since he touches no likeness, but to realities, since he touches reality. And when he has given birth to real virtue and brought it up, will it not be granted him to be a friend of God and immortal if any man ever is? Uh-oh. Does that suggest? Now, how can we have it and not have it? That's the trick in philosophy.
And why is it always there and we're not looking?
Well, that's easy. Yeah, but the one we're on now is how can there be a relationship and at the same time say no relationship?
I don't understand.
different levels of participation?
Different levels of participation means, therefore, at the 10th stage, talk about it in such a way that we can save it. Go ahead.
Well, you're participating with God, as you call it, at each one of the stages, but...
That's true. There's participation on each level. Louder.
As I said before, it's a purification such that there are hindrances towards a direct relationship, which the 10th suggests. And as you move up, you're getting rid of more and more of those things that are keeping you from complete participation.
I can't hear the last part. Louder. We got to talk louder.
As you're going up, then you get rid of more and more of those things that keep you from complete participation.
That's true. As you go up, you lose more and more of the obstacles that prevented you from participating.
Oh,
Sir?
so that means, in other words, then once you get more familiar with it, okay, the next time you get ready to meditate, it should be easier
Yes.
for you to go to the light?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Right. Yes. Decidedly. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Back to page 127, building on what Chance just said, the idea of some weakness in the participant. When the light is obscured, another principle appears to assume dominion, yet it is not by its own potency. Some kind of an error of appearance versus what is real might be language we could use to make these distinctions of levels and participation. Because there seems to be an appearance of something that appears to assume dominion, but the language might suggest doesn't.
That's right. That's right.
So it's in the way as an appearance.
It's only an appearance. That's the fun part of it. You see, at certain very interesting levels of this, the most interesting and characteristic statement about these higher experiences when someone comes out of it and says, hey, you know what? It was obvious. It was in front of me all the time and I didn't recognize it. I mean, it was there all the time. Look here, all right? Is it possible that at this point the distinction between a mind enlightened to this degree and a mind as such is no longer functioning? And whatever Socrates is doing nothing other than in some way bringing this about, talking about it, making it real, which is nothing other than exhibiting in his own life and his own experience the very principles necessary for a structure of reality to be such that it makes of man a friend of the gods. So, thank you.
Well, what about this giving birth?
Let's do the reverse. Go ahead.
No, the giving birth.
Giving birth, excuse
Is
me.
that some kind of a development?
Yes, this is giving birth. Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, is that a development that takes place
Yes,
from the conception to the birth?
yes, yes, yes. That's another way of talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's one of the metaphors you can use to explain this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
I have one question, whether this God over there is really the God we've been talking about, or for Paul, what we call another appearance that assumes dominion.
Well, in the history of thought, there was a battle between these two systems. And this system, Christianity, put down this totally. Closed the academy, right? The philosophers were all killed. Right. Exiled, killed. Yeah, yeah. And therefore this triumph in history until last week.
So when he was converted, did he stop stoning people?
Hmm?
When he was converted, did he stop stoning people?
So far as the letters he wrote indicate, yes.
But he didn't stop bothering people.
No. No.
Women especially.
Really?
It's terrible.
Really?
I'll talk
Okay.
about it later.
Thank you.